First, we have the case, and I'm not too particular about cases, but you have to have something to jam all the different components into. And I gotta start off by saying, ignore all the prices that you're gonna see on this video because I didn't pay anywhere near those prices. As a matter of fact, this case I got at a discount outlet right down the road, and I think I paid $10 brand new with a 450 watt power supply, which I did not use, but it's sitting around here somewhere as a backup. Now, I bought this case for a few different reasons. Main reason, obviously, it was $10, and you just can't beat that. Second, I like the airflow in this for a cheap case. There's room for a 140mm fan in the front, two 120mm fans on the side, a 120mm fan in the back, and then the power supply resides in the bottom, which I like because you don't want to have that hot power supply sitting up by your CPU. I like having it on the bottom where it can exhaust straight out the back. So, that's really all I have to say on cases. You have to have one. I wish this one were better insulated so that it wasn't quite as loud, but it has everything that I need on it. Next, power supply. You want to have a quality power supply. You don't necessarily need to have 750 watts. This is the one I have. I got it for half what they're showing on here. And really, for the system that I have, 600 watts would have done, but I'm building with an eye towards the future and possible future upgrades, adding additional video cards, so on. So I bought a little bigger than I need. It is an 80 plus bronze certified power supply. To explain that to you here briefly, I have this little chart. 80 plus means that it will run at least 80% efficient at any load. So you see here 20, 50, 100%, it runs at least 80%. These other silver, gold, platinum, they just run a little more efficient at those same loads. 80% plus bronze is really what I feel comfortable with for the price. Next is a motherboard. This is another place you do not want to skimp. Don't go and buy the absolute cheapest motherboard that you can because you're not going to have high quality components. I prefer Asus as my go-to motherboard manufacturer. I just like the different controls that they have. This one came with some software here that I'll pull up. Really cool. Has some different utilities that you can use. This you can actually take and set the speed of your fans. You've got silent mode where the fan will run at lower RPMs for longer. You've got turbo mode where it'll actually ramp the speed of the fans up faster. All kinds of different things. The other really cool thing about this is, let's see here, you can, where the heck is it even at on here? Oh, no, here's where I want to be. Yeah, okay, fine. You can auto-tune your CPU. In other words, you can actually overclock it from this utility in Windows. All you've got to do is click on Fast or Extreme, click on Start, and it will run through this little procedure where it determines the fastest possible overclock for your cooling solution. Really cool little thing. You can also go into manual mode where you can mess with it yourself if you know the different voltages and stuff that you want to set, but I don't even mess with that. I think this did an overclock of 4.3 gigahertz. This is based on my stock cooler, and I'll talk a little bit more about coolers later. But anyway, Asus quality components had all the stuff that I wanted this particular motherboard. This was a mid-range. I got it on sale for a really good price. I don't even remember what it was now. But yeah, mid-range motherboard. Don't buy the cheapest. The most expensive is probably more than what you need. Asus is a good manufacturer. MSI is a good manufacturer. ASRock, I've used a couple of ASRock boards for different builds, and I'm not really overly impressed with the quality of them. So I stick with Asus. It's somebody I know. It's somebody that makes good quality stuff. There you go. All right, processors. This is the processor that I bought. It's the FX8350 from AMD, and I don't really side with one particular processor manufacturer over the other. I like to use Intel processors in my laptops. I like to use AMD processors in my desktops. Now, AMD processors, by and large, are significantly less expensive than the equivalent Intel processor. Now, I'm not going to argue which one is better. I just like to get the most bang for my buck, and I think the AMD processors generally offer that. When I bought this was, I believe, $50 less expensive than an i5, and I actually got it on sale for $20 less than that. So $70 less than an i5 at the time, and you actually get better performance with this in a lot of games. And people are going to argue buy Intel, and it's true. A lot more games are optimized for Intel right now, because Intel has a higher per core performance than the AMD does. AMD has more cores for roughly the same or less money. Now, I went with AMD because I believe with the next generation consoles coming out, they're using 8-core AMD processors, and the same thing is going to hold true with the graphics processor I'll talk about a little bit later if I don't remember that I said this. Since they're going with the AMD 8-core processors, I think that you'll see a lot more games optimized to use more cores as opposed to better per-core performance, so I went with AMD, kind of future-proofing. Also with this is the overclocked edition, the black edition, which is easy to overclock. I wouldn't have normally overclocked it, but the ASUS utility made it so easy I did. Generally, I will keep it at the stock speed, and then only upgrade it in the future if I feel I'm not getting the performance I want. So, AMD, great. Then I also bought an FX 6300, which is a 6-core processor for my entertainment PC that I have upstairs. I have a little chart here that I'm going to show you. These are the FX processors that are currently available. These two new processors here are ridiculously expensive. Don't even bother looking at them because from what I can tell, the 8350 gives you 80% of the performance at less than 50% of the cost. Way less than 50% of the cost. The sweet spot in this right now, if you're building, because of the games that are available now, is probably the 4300 to 6300. And if you look over here, the big difference obviously is the speed, and then you see the L2 cache. They all have the same level 1 cache. The L2 cache, basically there's 1 megabyte per core, so 8-core processors have 8 megabytes, 6-core processors have 6 megabytes, and so on. I got my 6-core processor, my 6300, on sale for $50 off. So literally at the time that I bought this for my entertainment PC, it was 50% of the performance at less than 50%, I'm sorry, it was 80% the performance at less than 50% the cost of the 8350. And then if you can find the 4350 at a good price, that is also a good processor from everything I've read. Alright, we talked about processors. Let's talk about cooling for the processors. Most of the time when you get a retail box, it's going to come with a stock cooler, and the stock cooler that came with my 8350 was actually really good for a stock cooler. I was impressed. The one that came with the 6300, not so much. But I'm going to talk about aftermarket cooling. Something like this here is fantastic. This will run you, if you're really lucky, you can find it for about $30. This is what's in my entertainment PC, and it will cool my processor about 15 degrees Celsius cooler at almost every range than the stock processor. It's not real expensive, and it works really well. And it'll do even better if you mount an additional fan on the cooler. Really good. I, however, found this. It was a return at a Best Buy. It's a very cheap water cooler. It is not significantly better in performance than the Hyper 212 Evo. A little bit better from what I can tell. But what I like about this is it will actually vent the heat directly out the back of the case, where with the Evo you have to have a separate case fan to vent the heat out. This just kind of blows it in. So, I don't know. I'll probably post pictures here to show you what I'm talking about. Anyway, the water cooler, even though it's not terribly expensive, it will do the same job as the Evo, but it vents the heat straight out the back instead of into the case. And I like that. Alright, I don't have my RAM out of the system to show you, but this is what I bought. I bought Kingston HyperX Black 1600 MHz DDR3 RAM. I got two 8GB sticks for a really good price. That's why I picked this. And some people are going to tell you buy faster RAM than 1600 MHz. I'm going to tell you, unless you have one of the AMD APUs where you've got the GPU built onto the processor, don't waste your money, because you're just not going to see a huge performance boost when you have a graphics card installed on your computer. You're going to see some, but most of the difference is going to be at really low resolution. So since nobody wants to run at really low resolution all the time, don't waste your money. 1600 megahertz, plenty fast. Buy whatever you can find at a good price. Alright, so let's talk hard drives for a minute. If you have an existing hard drive that you're happy with, by all means use it. I had an old 1TB hard drive that I use in my current computer for storage. I also have a 1TB USB 3.0 portable drive around here somewhere. But I have a Kingston V300 SSD drive. Mine is the 120GB flavor, and I'm very happy with this. I use it as the boot drive for my operating system, and I can boot from a cold start into Windows in like 10 or 15 seconds as opposed to a minute and a half or more. It really is amazing for starting up programs. Any program that I have installed directly to this, and there aren't many, starts up almost instantly. It's truly amazing. Last but certainly not least, if you're going to be playing modern PC games on your computer, you need to have a good graphics card. Most PC games are going to utilize the graphics card far more than they will the processor. So if you have to spend a little less on your processor to get a better graphics card, that's probably the way to go. Now, I got the R7950 from MSI. This is the overclocked edition, and I'm going to get into a little bit why I chose the 7950 in a second, but real quick, this is the card that I got, and it's got this reference style heatsink on it. I immediately ripped this stupid heatsink off of my card, and I installed an aftermarket heatsink on it that looks something like this. This is the same card from MSI, significantly more expensive, and literally the only difference on it is that they added this aftermarket heatsink with two 90mm fans. The one that I bought looks almost identical to this, but instead of two 90mm fans, it has 200mm fans. I got it for $6.99 at that discount outlet down the road, and this is a prime example of what I was talking about, where I will see something for a really good price and I will pick it up for a future build. So when I bought this graphics card, even though I didn't like this heatsink, I knew I had an aftermarket heatsink I could throw on it, and it makes a 10 to 15 degree difference across the board. So that was $7 very well spent on the aftermarket cooler at the discount outlet down the road. Now, a little bit about the different video cards you can get. NVIDIA and AMD cards use different architectures, but when comparing cards from the same manufacturer, you can usually be certain that the card with the higher number is better. Also, cards within the same series use the same architecture, and the main difference is the number of stream processors, or for NVIDIA, CUDA cores. So when you look at the 7900 series, you'll see that the 7950 has fewer stream processors, and what happens is they'll produce the GPU and it'll have a certain number of bad sectors, so they deactivate them. Anything that falls within a certain tolerance becomes a 7950, anything that falls within a certain higher tolerance becomes a 7970. And then the 7990 actually includes two of the same GPUs that the 7970 uses. That really is the main difference. Now, this one, the stock core, I think is 830 megahertz. This is the overclock edition. I think it's at like 840. And then it has 3 gigabytes of DDR5 memory. What I like about this is with AMD cards, they're designed to be overclocked. So I can get in here, and you can see that I did this previously. I've overclocked mine from 840 to 1000 megahertz in the GPU clock settings. In the memory clock settings, it's overclocked, I think, from 1200 to 1375. Now, these are the settings of the 7970. And I've also enabled manual fan control because I was gaming earlier, where it has the fan constantly at 100%. If I want to set everything back to default, which I normally have it, I just forgot to switch it back, I can do this, click apply, and now everything's set back to factory standard. Really easy to overclock the graphics card if you're going to be playing a game and you want to run it higher. It won't run at those speeds all the time, like you see right here. GPU clock is at 300 megahertz, memory clock is at 150 megahertz. That'll only boost up if it needs to. With the AMD Catalyst Control Center, if I wasn't using the ASUS overclocking tool, you can actually do it right from here. And basically you click override existing CPU settings. You can actually overclock it from the AMD Catalyst Control Center. Alright, I think we're done with all these. I knew I would forget, so I'm adding this on after the fact. Like I said earlier, I went with AMD because the next generation consoles will be using the AMD CPUs and GPUs. So I'm hoping that the games will be optimized to use the 8-core processors and the Radeon graphics processors. So with Steambox coming out using Intel and NVIDIA, it's hard to say for sure, but I think, as in the past, they're probably going to side with the home consoles, at least for this next generation. So I was sort of future-proofing myself. And it will really all just depend on whether or not the developers decide to side with Steambox, which we don't know how popular it will be yet, or the next-gen consoles, which will be really for the first time truly watered-down PCs using PC parts in home consoles. We'll see. So there you have it. That is what I have in my current computer. The only thing I didn't mention in the video is your CD-ROM drive, and honestly, you almost never use your CD-ROM drive anymore. When I install a new component, I go right to the manufacturer's website and get the latest drivers. That, by the way, is very important to do with your video card. You definitely want to have the most up-to-date drivers when you go to use it, because they're constantly updating the drivers to work better with newer games. So if you use the CD that comes in it, it's probably not going to work with the newest games properly, certainly not to its full potential. A lot of times you can actually see a difference of 15 or 20 frames per second just by updating your graphics card's drivers. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's the first one like this I've ever tried to do, so I apologize if it sucked. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.